The Donald was in the area for a few days recently, swinging his golf club. Donald is now done with Dundonald, and Dundonald is done with Donald. And this here is a rubbish chute, a medieval one. A novel way of getting rid of waste. There you can see the floor below, or the lake hall. And this is the old chimney flue. This allowed the smoke to escape from braziers placed nearby. A second flue is in the opposite wall. It flew away. Hello everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today Dan and I are here at Dundonald Castle. Dundonald Castle is between Troon and Kilmarnock in Ayrshire. And of course, the Donald was in the area for a few days recently, swinging his golf club. Donald is now done with Dundonald, and Dundonald is done with Donald. Anyway, we're here for a guided tour, so please come and join us as we have a look round this lovely ruin of a 14th century castle, which was built in 1371 for King Robert II of Scotland and his son King Robert III. We are at the top of the building. This is the second floor. This is where King Robert II would have lived with his second wife Euphemia. He was married twice. He had 21 children in total, and he died in 1390, and then his son lived here also. But his son, King James I of Scotland, wasn't so keen on living here, and sadly the castle passed into various noble families. Over yonder is Loudon Hill, and that was a site of a battle between the Scots and the English.
On this section of wall, if you look closely, you can see on the third stone and fourth stone up onwards, there's a engraved stylized letter M. That is the initial of the stonemason who built or oversee the building of this castle in 1371. It's probably the master mason.
This here is the guardrobe or wardrobe on the left, and on the right would have been the lavatory. In those days they believed that all the pongs were actually good for the clothing and probably the health, although actually that's not the case. It must have been a bit whiffy, but that was their belief anyway. Here is a fireplace. This was put in at a later date when the Great Hall was divided into two chambers. When it was first built, it was just one big chamber. Now, this castle is the third incarnation of Dundonald. There was an earlier one from the 12th century, which was Motte and Bailey. Then there was a second castle, much bigger castle on this site, and then this version was built in 1371. Our lovely guide called Jim was saying that this weekend around here it's going to be the Highland Games, so it's going to be really busy here all day with people running up and down the stairs. I'm surprised I actually got to the top of the stairs, because I'm not great with heights, and I've managed to climb right to the top, which for me is an incredible achievement. But look at the lovely masonry over here. You can see this column straight ahead of you, and that stonework lower down with all the ridges in. And where do you think this is 14th century? It's unbelievable. So this is the great upper hall. It was a luxurious life up here, and this, as I've said, was the quarters of King Robert II and King Robert III. It was beautifully decorated and it had a stunning roof. Now, the thing is, it looks just like normal stone now, but that time it would have been painted with massive tapestries that came from France. It would have been really colourful. It was very fashionable and comfortable. It was given a more flamboyant appearance than the lake or lower hall, which is on the next floor down, because it's where the king spent his most private moments, and also doing his paperwork and having meetings and enjoying life. This castle was used frequently like a hunting lodge. So the king would come here with maybe 60 or 70 guests, very much like a country seat. Up here we had stone vault ribs. These didn't support the roof, but were added purely as ornamentation. The roof, of course, would have been a vaulted one. The high table was probably placed at the far end, so probably down that end, lit by the large window in the east or right-hand wall. The pointed doorway behind the high table led to the wall closets and latrine or the garderobe. And then this display panel marks the position of a timber partition which screened the room from the service area. And here's an interpretation of what it might have looked like in its heyday. And this here is a rubbish chute, a medieval one. A novel way of getting rid of waste. There you can see the floor below, or the lake hall. Now in Gaelic, Dun, D-U-I-N, simply means fort. So even in England, places like Dunstable would be a place where there was a fort. Here we have a stone dated 1990. This is obviously a replacement. Jim was also saying that some of the mortar was possibly mixed with rags, and that's why in some places, particularly down the other end, it does look like a rag that has been soaked in mortar. It was to give extra strength. So we're down here now, and this is the lake hall. We're on a gallery here, but at one time the floor would have gone all the way across. And then down below there would have been much entertaining done. You would have had the king and his queen this side on a table in the horizontal position, and then you'd have long tables placed in a vertical line towards the other end. At the top end and down they might have used silver, but then at the far end they would have used wooden trenchers, which is a kind of bowl-like plate. Not to be confused with Trenchers, the fish and chip restaurant in Whitby. And this is the old chimney flue. This allowed the smoke to escape from braziers placed nearby. A second flue is in the opposite wall. It flew away. So now we're in the Great Hall, and here is a picture or an interpretation of what King Robert II of Scotland and his second wife, Queen Euphemia, might have looked like. He was born with a funny eye. It's believed that he may have been born by caesarean section. His mother had had a horse riding accident and died soon after. Euphemia was a Ross, but even now the royal family are descended from this King Robert II of Scotland. And then here we've got some coats of arms or family crests or shields. This is Royal Dundonald Castle's red chevron on gold ground, the arms of the Earth of Strathearn. This earldom was conferred on Robert the Stewart by David II in recognition of his guardianship of Scotland during David II's years of captivity in England. So there it is on the far end. The gold and black is the emblem of the Duke of Atholl. Robert became the Earl of Atholl in 1342. And then the third one in is the famous lion rampant. This is the sign of the sovereign, and it's rightfully there in its place in the middle, above the door. Then we have the blue and white. This stands for the Stewart of Scotland, and Robert II and his ancestors had held this since the 12th century. And then the blue emblem signifies the Lord Lion of Scotland. It's the Lord Lion's job to choose, for example, the clan chief of a particular clan. This position was held by King Robert II's son-in-law, and it is he who was responsible for the design and construction of Dundonald Castle in 1371. And up here in the corner of the window on the left-hand side is a much worn image of Queen Euphemia. We're outside now, and this is the site of the entrance gate into the inner courtyard, and up here as well. If you think what the windows might have looked at back in the day as well, it would have been very impressive. We've got all these spectacular views. And then over yonder, you've got one of the Munros. Munro is a hill or mountain or fell, whatever you like to call it, and they're usually over 3,000 feet. And on a clear day, you can usually see over to the Isle of Arran and also the Mull of Kintyre. This is the south entrance. If you like, it's the rear side elevation of the castle. And if you look closely, you can see these 5 coats of arms, which, although you can't really tell the design now, probably replicate the ones that I showed you indoors. This would have been the site of the west entrance from the 13th century. It was originally flanked by 2 round towers. The stump of the north tower survives on your left, The entrance was blocked when the tower house was built in the late 14th century, around the time it was built, in other words, remembering that this was built on the existing footprint, this version of the castle. And then I've pointed out the 5 armorial shields, which also date to the late 14th century. Carved stones also show 2 lions and a human head. So there we are, that's our little tour around Dundonald Castle. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this little tour, please give this video a like. Please comment. What do you think of it here? We think it's grand, spectacular views. Please share, please subscribe, click ye oldie notification belly, and we will see you again soon for the next one. Until then, bye for now.
Bye.